Hey everyone, welcome. Hope you're all doing great, and if it's your first time here, we'd love for you to join us by liking and subscribing to the channel. So, the content of Donald Trump's letter to Japan was totally unacceptable. According to Itsunori Onodera, the policy chief for Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, during a party meeting, sending Japan, a major ally, a single letter like that is incredibly disrespectful. I'm deeply outraged. Donald Trump is a horrible person. Let's take a look at what Prime Minister Shiba had to say. Japan is furious. Shiba said, "We need to work towards more independence from the United States." Thomas Logan, a journalist covering Japanese affairs, pointed out that this is happening just as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is preparing for a major meeting with North Korea. Meanwhile, the United States is insulting its allies, Japan, South Korea, Australia, basically almost every one of them, while Russia is building up its own alliances. What about Japan's former prime minister? He was just as angry. He said, "We can't allow a country that tries to impose its will by force to shape the international order." That was former PM Kishida. He said we can't keep treating the United States as an ally anymore. Like I said earlier, Japan is extremely angry. They're refusing to back down or bow to the United States over Trump's ridiculous tariff letter. Prime Minister Shiba said, "Nothing's going to change. We can't and we won't give in. These conditions are unacceptable for us." Let's break down what he said. Right now, there are a few sticking points that Japan and the United States haven't been able to agree on. That's why there's still no deal. The Japanese government has refused to make easy concessions. Instead, they're pushing for serious talks, standing firm on what's important. Now let's look at what the media is saying. In its Wednesday editorial, the Mainichi newspaper wrote, "Japan must not cave to U.S. pressure. It should firmly negotiate to revise the unfairly high tariffs." Shiba was praised for showing strong leadership. Asahi Shimbun, a left-leaning paper, published a similar editorial titled, "Trust Us. Trump needs to learn bullying doesn't work." They slammed Washington's demands as arrogant and over-the-top, urging Japanese companies to diversify their export markets. The paper backed Shiba's refusal to surrender and said Japan should maintain the alliance, but not like it used to be. Professor Toshimitsu Shigemura of Waseda University said Prime Minister Shiba should have realized sooner that Japan's special relationship with the U.S. is over. He said Japan kept believing the U.S. was our ally, but it's clear now, we're enemies. Shiba never really built a personal connection with Trump, unlike former PM Shinzo Abe, who famously played golf with him. Shiba also lacks experience dealing with foreign leaders, which left Japan struggling to predict how the Trump administration would act, or why they'd suddenly threaten an ally. Personally, I don't fully blame Shiba. Even Abe would have probably seen things the same way. If you look at recent polls, around 80 to 85% of Japanese people no longer support the U.S. or even see it as a threat. Honestly, if Japan just plays along with Trump, sacrificing national interests just to play golf or act like a puppet, there's no way to save face. Tell us what you think. If you're from Japan, let us know in the comments. But I don't think Trump can just walk over Japan. Japan's not just any country. It's one of America's biggest trade partners and investors. In fact, Japan invests more in the U.S. than any other country. They own more U.S. Treasury bonds than anyone, over $1 trillion. China comes second, but still about $30 billion behind. Japan is also the biggest foreign employer of Americans. Over 1 million Americans work at Japanese companies. So this kind of disrespect, totally out of line. And Trump? He exaggerates and lies. He says the same kind of nonsense he told Canada. "We can't make a deal unless you stop sending explosives," just like, "We can't make a deal unless Canada stops sending fentanyl," which was a flat-out lie. Now he's saying we can't make a deal with Japan unless they stop putting tariffs on American cars. Japan's response? "We're not putting tariffs on cars. What are you even talking about?" The Japanese media even mocks Trump with a nickname, Taco, a wordplay that suggests Trump always chickens out in the end. With the August 1st deadline approaching, many expect Trump will once again delay the tariffs. Let's go deeper. Prime Minister Shiba called Trump's latest tariff war a fight for Japan's national interest. After Trump announced a 25% tariff, Tokyo made it clear they're standing their ground. "This is a battle for our national interest," said Shiba. "Even with allies, we won't allow exploitation. We have to be honest and protect what matters." In a rally in Saga on Wednesday, LDP policy chief Itsunori Onodera slammed Trump, calling him a terrible person. His treatment of Japan is disgraceful. And don't forget, the Japanese Senate has key elections coming up on July 20th. That's why Japan canceled some meetings with the United States. They don't want to be seen as weak or cozying up to Trump right before the vote. The ruling party is expected to lose some seats already, thanks to Trump. Now let me remind you of what the opposition party has been saying for a while. A member of Japan's parliament said a few months ago, "What the United States is saying makes no sense. There's no logic or consistency. Honestly, their behavior is closer to bullying. If Japan gives in to their unreasonable demands and calls it negotiation or a deal, then we're setting a terrible example. If a blackmailer gets paid once, they'll keep coming back. The whole setup is a mess. It's like a math problem that makes no sense. You'd get a big fat 0 on a test. Even if someone like Minister Akazawa is serious and capable, dealing with irrational people just doesn't work. Don't give in to American blackmail. It's bad to say, but that's what it is, blackmail." And recently, while former President Biden was able to bring Japan and South Korea closer together, Trump has attacked both countries with tariffs. Meanwhile, China is stepping up and arranging trilateral meetings between the foreign ministers of Japan and South Korea. And just a few months ago, remember when no one was talking about this trade war with Japan? I was already covering it, giving you all the data. In fact, I even interviewed former U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel, and here's what he said. Japan has been the #1 foreign direct investor in the U.S. for 4 years in a row. Over 1 million Americans work for Japanese companies, nearly half of them. A big chunk of Japan's investment goes into manufacturing. So yeah, we need to be smart about how we spend our money. Secondly, Japan hosts the largest U.S. military presence anywhere in the world. It's the only country with a permanent U.S. aircraft carrier stationed there. Japan is basically the backbone of our deterrent strategy against China in the Indo-Pacific region. So no, it's not just about economics. This is a relationship. It includes national security, diplomatic support, political alignment, economic cooperation, and overall integration. Now picture this. When the U.S. wants to put more sanctions on China, especially related to high-tech export controls, the only way it can work is if Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Netherlands are on board with us. They'll really have to think hard about whether they should stand with the U.S. or keep letting their companies export to China. That's why these relationships aren't one-dimensional. They're a network of trust and interests. So honestly, this kind of short-sighted approach just doesn't cut it. We could have followed a more strategic path like we did in previous years when I was working with President Clinton, setting up the 5 pillars of trade and so on. As I said earlier, Japan is now the #1 foreign investor in the United States. Almost 1 million Americans work for Japanese companies, half of them in manufacturing. Those are exactly the kinds of jobs we want here in the U.S. Here's what else was said. Let's roll the clip. Right now, China is holding joint meetings with Japan and South Korea, both diplomatically and in terms of trade, so they're basically taking advantage of all the goodwill and infrastructure we built with those countries. What we're doing is damaging not just our alliances, but also the credibility of our deterrence against our main rival, China. Sorry, but we have to talk about this because I've negotiated on this before. People always ask how China moves in and fills the gaps, both physically and diplomatically, where the U.S. used to be. They build literal infrastructure, or bricks, but also work on relationships beyond the bricks with countries that used to be close U.S. allies. Let's not forget, after the U.S. showed weakness in Ukraine and looked vulnerable to Putin, China started flexing hard. Within a week or two, they carried out an unprecedented naval maneuver against Australia, one of our allies. They shut down civilian air traffic near Sydney. Then they pulled similar moves near Japan in the Sea of Japan. They did it against Vietnam, the Philippines, and even in the Taiwan Strait. They're seeing weakness, and weakness invites aggression. That's why you have to be smart about how you show strength. It's no coincidence that while China is talking to Japan and South Korea, 2 key allies, they're trying to reinforce their message that China is the rising power and America is fading. They're saying you can either align with us or we'll pressure you. Now lastly, let me remind you of the meeting that former President Biden held on August 18, 2020. He brought Japan and South Korea together. What a contrast to all the chaos, bitterness, recklessness, and nonsense from Donald Trump. Let's roll the clip. This is the first ever independent summit between the leaders of Japan, the Republic of Korea, and the United States. I can't think of a better way to mark this new chapter in our trilateral cooperation than meeting here at Camp David. Strengthening the ties between our democracies has been a priority of mine for a long time, even going back to when I was vice president. That's because our countries are stronger and the world is safer when we stand together. Let me repeat that. Our countries are stronger and the world is safer when we stand united. I know this is something we all believe in. I want to thank both of you for your political courage in making this happen. I'm looking forward to a productive meeting and to keeping this momentum going. You've both taken on the hard work, and I think what we're doing here is historic. Building the foundation for us three to face the future together. I truly appreciate your leadership, and I look forward to working with you as we begin this new chapter of cooperation. Let's renew our commitment to be a force for good, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but honestly, across the world. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment to support the channel. Stay tuned for the next video.